We're late. Oh, those clocks aren't right. Oh, man. We're late. Cool. Welcome, everybody. This is the first session for ISC Squared's meeting calendar for the 26-2017 year, September session. It was not originally scheduled to present today, but we had some wonderful opportunities to move things around. So I'm presenting today instead of later in the year, and the folks that were supposed to present today will be presenting in November. It'll be a really exciting presentation. Welcome, everybody. Everyone that apparently got the message, use the e-Vite, come have some pizza, and do this right? I can be trained some days. Oh, there we go. Did I miss a page? Okay. Let's do it this way. Okay, cool. The officers have worked over the summer to line up sponsors to help keep the chapter going without the need of dues, and in order to have some opportunities for the chapter to engage in some things that will help the security community here. Our biggest sponsor is Tyler Technologies and the Tyler Foundation. We really want to thank them. The representatives here tonight, Peter Higgins, former officer of the chapter. Thank you very much on behalf of the chapter for the support that Tyler has given us over the many years that we've been, meeting here in Maine. Really appreciate their activities and their help. Kaplan University, who have offered this space to us at no cost. Fabulous savings, and it's a great space. Automated WebEx presentations, big room, very generous use of their facilities. And Ryan MacArthur, not only an instructor at Kaplan, but also a full-time security person up in Augusta, is our key liaison here for the technologies. He makes it possible for us to use Adobe Connect. Thank you very much, sir. You're going to see these ads every month. Kaspersky Lab, through Mark, has given us a very generous donation to support the chapter. We really appreciate Mark stepping up this summer and making sure that we got a good check to help with the expenses of the chapter over the next 12 months or so. CyberSN, Sean Henry, a good friend of mine in the IT workspace, arranged for CyberSN to also provide us with a check, which I don't have in hand yet, but I know it's coming. He's a very trustworthy guy. They do placement for cybersecurity professionals at all levels of the craft. If you're looking for someone who can really help you with your career planning, Sean Henry is a guy who can really help you out in CyberSN. They're really growing. They're growing all across the country in our resources. A little bit of housekeeping. This chapter does not file CPE hours on your behalf. All right, what we do is, if you're on remotely, Andrew, you need to send an email to us letting us know that you attended the session remotely, and we'll see that in the recording that we're doing of the session tonight. For those who are physically here, sign the sign-in sheet so that we have a paper record. Submit your CPE requirements to whatever organization you're using. If you get audited, you can send one of the officers an email saying that you need evidence that you came to the meeting. We will look up the meetings that you say you've come to, find your name if you write it cleanly enough on the sign-in sheet, and we'll confirm for you with another email that you did attend those meetings. All right? So we'll have a record that we can validate. We'll send you an email validating that you did show up, and but other than that, you're on your own to actually report your hours. Okay? Again, we have a benefit here of Kaplan's allowing us to use their Adobe Connect. The connection information will be part of the e-Vite for each of the meetings going forward. Any questions on any of the CPE stuff? Oh, okay, cool. Okay, so you've already had the pizza and the soda. I'll do the main presentation tonight. Then Rick is going to do a roundtable discussion on threat intelligence and threat awareness that he's been tracking for the last month or so. Rick, do you have a presentation you want up?
I do have a presentation, yes.
Okay. How big is it?
How big is it?
Yeah. Probably going to have to throw it up there. So if you want to put it on the USB, we'll get it loaded later. Oh, that really does track really well, doesn't it? Cool. All right. Chris Elgie, working for the Guard, is our Safe and Secure Online Chair. He's been working, trying to reach out to the Maine Principals Association and the Maine, directors and teachers groups to line up organizations, school districts at different levels of education who would like to have professional cybersecurity people come out and give addresses to their student bodies based on the ISC Squares Safe and Secure materials, how to be safe online from bullying, how to protect yourself from stalkers, that sort of thing. He was going to be here tonight, but he ended up having to actually do a recruitment night up in Bangor. Good for him. He'll give a more full status on his efforts there on the LinkedIn page a little bit later in the month. But we are actively trying to find both individuals who would like to volunteer to do presentations and school districts across the state who would like to have professional presentations for their student communities. So if you know of a school district who would like that kind of resource, let us know, let Chris know. If you know that you would like to participate as a volunteer to give some of that instruction, let us know, and we'll try to hook everybody up together on a calendar. Okay? Then after that, we'll do our Down East Minute, and we'll do a meeting wrap-up. So we should be out of here by 8 o'clock, depending on how many questions you have for Rick, because no one asks me any questions when I give my presentations. Cool. Catherine and Peter are going to be leading a panel discussion in October. It's going to be a joint meeting of the IAPP, that's the International Association of Privacy Professionals, cool, and the ISC Square chapter. So you guys are bringing about 20 people. We might get another 20 or so. So we'll fill the room. And it won't be pizza. There'll be something nicer. And the guy in charge of that has promised me that you will be very impressed with his catering choices. So it's something to really look forward to. That's the October meeting. The November meeting, members of this group, I should say, were invited to participate in the Cyber Shield exercise. Chris Elgie was a lead on getting that organized. Cyber Shield is the federal government's military-based live range exercise for red and blue team testing that takes about 2 weeks, and they do it in Indiana on a military base. They simulate the infrastructure and the systems of a town. Then you have one group of people trying to subvert it, another group of people trying to protect it. Right? So the panel will be participants that went from Maine to that exercise, and they did a really great job. So it's going to be a really worthwhile discussion. If you're interested in cyber attack, cyber defense, and all the technologies and techniques that are used, they're going to go into some of the stuff that they had to deal with when they were on red and blue teams. It'll be really cool. Okay, so that's October and November. We have, I didn't bother listing it, we have December, we have January, and we're looking for additional presentations. So if you have something that you'd like to spend 60 to 90 minutes talking about, come next winter, let us know what it is you want to present on, and we'll help you get it organized for a session. If you know of a vendor who has a really cool product and can give a vendor agnostic representation of the technology, we really like to get some technical presentations in for the chapter as well. But again, we're good until after Christmas, and then after Christmas, We like to have things already planned and scheduled. So now's the time to come forward if you have something that you want to present. Okay, some ideas and concepts. Okay. Is that it? That's the end of that tab. All right. And how do I do the next one? Stop sharing. All right. All right. Is there two of them? Oh, we have two people on the Connect. Excellent. So for those guys who are on the Adobe Connect, if you can hear me, let me know. Oh, someone's typing. Excellent. What about you, Troy? Maybe he's got me on mute. That wouldn't hurt my feelings too bad. All right. I love this topic. I've been planning on presenting on this topic for months. I was just holding it in my back pocket till a point of need came up, and suddenly a point of need came up. The FFIEC Cybersecurity Assessment. I'm going to read my slide. What the heck is it? Why should you care? I'm going to answer all those questions tonight. You ready? Jeez, tough crowd. All right. And if this doesn't take 60 minutes, that's all right. The Federal Financial Institutions Examiner Council. Is there anyone here who does not have a bank account of some quality? Anyone here without a checking account? Anyone here without a savings account? Anyone here without an investment account? Anybody? Got to start them out earlier than this. Come on, man. He's got to go. All right. The Federal Financial Institutions Examiner Council, this is the concept. In regulations, federal and state, everybody is doing their own thing. The people who regulate the credit unions, the people who regulate the community banks, the people who regulate the regional banks, the people who regulate the national banks, the people who regulate the financial industry in any fashion, they all have their own regulators, right? Isn't that wonderful? You have a state regulator, you have a federal regulator, right? Depending on how you charted your institution and where you charted your institution at, they could all be using different criteria, and there's sometimes the criteria is actually different from one region to the other. The folks who go into the banks and the credit unions and the financial institutions, they could be using different standards that are only in their head, all right? That would seem to be kind of a problem, all right? The solution for the problem was all the regulators got together and they formed one council. These are the members of the council. The Federal Reserve, people who actually are responsible for the money on a national level through different regions. The FDIC, they're one of the direct regulators of financial institutions. NCUA, which is the National Credit Union Examiners, Auditors, excuse me. The OCC, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, they regulate a different category of institution. The Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, and then they have a committee that liaisons from the federal level to all the state regulators. All right? What these guys did is they said, we can't be sending our people out to validate the safety and security of the financial system, to keep the depositors' money safe. We can't effectively do that if we're all going by different rules, different criteria, different interpretations of rules, regulations, and laws. All right? So they came up with a process where they homogenized and reached agreement on everybody's standard. There are all sorts of different handbooks that have been issued by the regulators about how things are supposed to be operated. You may not know this, but the regulations on financial institutions has been pretty strict and is ratcheting up every year, and has been for a really long time. We're talking about 1990s, so unless I'm got that wrong, Suzanne. Was it 99, 98 that they started publishing these books saying, thou shalt do it this way? And the thou shalt do it this way was the FFIEC issuing the same book applicable to every kind of institution. Okay? Really, really impressive. They've been doing this for so long, and they've gotten better. So what's happened is that they've got the rules of how you issue homeowners loans, the rules about how you issue credit cards and debit cards, the rules about how you handle mobile banking, the rules about how you handle your IT infrastructure. They had all these different booklets that had different levels of revision, but they were all being applied to everybody more or less equally. But there wasn't any objective standard to understand how the organizations were actually doing on all these individual assessments. So the cybersecurity assessment is the answer from the regulators. It's been discussed for many years. It was actually published June of last year for the very first time. The key about the assessment is that there are 494 items on the assessment. Every institution has to answer, are they doing this or are they not doing it? 494 items, all right? You would think, how can the small little one office, 4 people credit union bank, credit union office, answer 494 questions and have it be equitable to the Bank of America? Answer on those questions, right? Anyone know how they do it? Oh, come on, I'm not the only one who knows this topic. Come on. But that doesn't solve the problem of how the really small group answers the questions that are still being faced by the really large organizations, right? He's got an answer. No! Cool. Right. The way they do it is the assessment is actually in 2 parts, all right? The federal government, through the FFIEC, realized that it wasn't practical to have every organization expected to answer yes to every single question, because the questions can be extremely interesting on how they're phrased and what the expectation is that's associated with the question, all right? They just, they knew it wasn't going to happen, right? But they did want a baseline that was equitable for every size of organization, right? So it's 494 questions. The key for the financial industry is you're not expected to answer yes to a big chunk of them, depending on your size and what you're doing as a business, the kinds of business activities that you're involved in. So it's in 2 parts. You've got the inherent risk profile, which I'll go over here in a minute, and then you've got the cybersecurity maturity, and that's where the questions are. But which questions you have to answer yes to is in the inherent risk. And then they come together in a unified report that will tell an organization, are they compliant to the requirements of the FFIEC assessment? The banks at this point are able to answer these questions and figure out their risk profile for themselves. And then they're expected, when the auditors come around during the normal cycle, to have the results available so the auditors can collect it and see how they did. All right? Suzanne's going to correct me when I get something wrong, aren't you? I work with Suzanne. We do these assessments. Okay. So originally published in June 2015. As of right now, they haven't updated it. There's been a lot of pushback from different sizes of organizations that they say it's unfair, right? And politics aside and macroeconomic conditions aside, they will update this and change it, right? They're probably going to wait till the new Congress is in, and then they can figure out who they can talk to about getting things changed. But at this point, there's so much uncertainty that there are no changes that are being published. They are updating some of their other documents from the FFIEC. We got a new one this week that was changed. The base information technology handbook on how they're supposed to run their infrastructure was just changed. They published it last Friday, right? Almost 100 pages. I haven't read the whole thing yet. Tomorrow. What? You don't want to know. You don't want to know. Anyway, so how does a financial institution deal with that? Right? Never seen it before. All right. 494 questions, a risk assessment on how risky they are. So we'll tell them where they're supposed to be in the ranges. How do they do that? Right? They can do it for themselves. All the materials that I'm about to show you are freely available from the FFIEC site. You can get all the questions, you can get the process controls, you can even get the sample board presentation to explain it to your board of directors that the FFIEC has created, right? Doesn't mean that people actually still have the time to figure it all out and do it on their own. There are companies that are actually offering free online tools that will walk you through the questions, accept your answers, and then generate an HTML report that you can look at the screen and say, oh, how well did we do? Are we compliant or are we not compliant on certain things? So those are also available. So there's lots of different ways to do it. What I prefer is that they contract with a firm like Sage, and then we walk them through the process. All right, we walk them through the questions. We help explain what the intent, based on all the other documentation that's available from the FFIEC, what the intent of some of the statements actually are, so that they can phrase that, so they can conceptualize that and how their organization is dealing with the problems or dealing with the requirements. And then we generate what I think is a really cool report that gives them a graphic representation, an action plan of the things that they didn't get compliant on, and recommendations on what they need to do to change their business process to get compliant. Sage does not walk into their office and tell them, we're going to help you change all these things. We just give them a report that gives them an analysis of what they need to look at. And then as we go through another cycle with them, which is starting up this fall, we're going back and we're saying, okay, you had 18 things that you were going to change to make things better. Which ones did you get done? Let's do another assessment. Same 494 questions. Have you moved the needle in any of the areas that you're responsible for? So the banks seem to really like our help, and we give them a nice, really cool tool that they can work with to move ahead. All right. So we're going to dive into the actual product now. The inherent risk profile, and again, remember, this is the same for every institution that has to deal with this. Bank of America doesn't get a different version of this than your local credit union does. Everyone's dealing with the same content. Their answers are expected to be different, and this is where we find out what answers they're supposed to do. Excuse me, which answers they need to be saying yes to. Yes, sir.
There's 500 questions related to cybersecurity or their whole banking process?
It's all about their cyber readiness and their preparedness for all sorts of cyber activities.
500 questions.
494 questions, yes.
Is there like a timeline that they have to follow or a date that they have to be in compliance by this, or they get fined? I mean, is there any kind of enforcement? Or?
Everyone is expecting that that is coming, right? They're expecting that, we'll get into a couple examples, but they're expecting that the government has put this out and said, hey, we want you to answer the questionnaire. We're going to look at your answers. We're going to compare your answers to everybody else that we talk to. You have to give us the answers, but we won't hold it against you if we don't like your answers.
But there are some examiners that are in the process of examining using that.
Yeah, they're supposed to ask for it, and then when they see what the answers actually are, they may have other questions. And we'll get into some examples of why that they might potentially have some other questions. But the cool thing is, right, that nobody in their right mind thinks that the federal government is going to ask you all these questions and ask you to fill it out, and then at some point not come back to you and say, the stuff that was voluntary, we said, do your best job last year, you got to have it done now. At some point, it's not an irrational expectation that at some point, the federal government's going to say, when their examiners show up, if you don't have all the baselines met, if you don't have all the evolving met, and you'll see those in a second, you don't pass your exam, and there are financial penalties, we could put you out of business. That one of the things that the financial institutions really, really hate about the examiners at the federal government level is they actually have the power to dissolve your organization. If they think you're not operating correctly, they can put you under a warning. If you don't correct the issues that caused a warning, and it doesn't have to be cybersecurity, although cybersecurity is now an area of accountability because of this assessment. It could be how they do loans. It could be how they run their operations as far as the back office is concerned. The examiners, because you're chartered, you can only have your business if your charter is renewed. They can put you out of business. And some banks are really, some institutions are really pressured to make sure that they never get a letter from the examiner saying, you've got defects. You've got things that have to be remediated. And if you don't do it in a certain amount of time, you're going to be liquidated. Your assets will be sold to somebody else. You'll all be out of a business. All right? So in the past, cybersecurity wasn't explicitly part of that. But with this assessment, the federal government can start doing that at some point in the future. But right now they're just saying, answer the questions, give us your answers. If we have other questions based on your answers, we'll talk with you about it. But I haven't heard of anybody saying they've given us a warning letter because we scored so poorly on the assessments. Yes?
What size bank does Sage predominantly do these assessments for? Like, would it be financially viable for a small town credit union to go for a giant company to help with the assessment?
We will help anybody. Yes. You know, different institutions have different financial restrictions on how much they can afford help. You know, we will help them do an assessment, but we won't come back to try to solve their problems, right? That's not what we do. We don't try to sell on services for things like that. So there are some institutions that just don't have the budget. A very small town, maybe one operation bank, doesn't have the resources, you know, because they don't make enough money to have someone else come in and help them. They have free or very near free options that they can do that with, right? Where they're getting the right answers for the right reasons when they do the assessment on their own like that. You know, it's a function of their size and their sophistication. You know, it's really, you know, outside of our control. You know, Sage as an organization, we don't deal with the $20 billion banks. We're a very regional organization. We have a very long, since 2004, 2005, history of the regional banks, the community banks here. We have a lot of clients who have been with us for a really long time. We get new ones all the time. We lose some every once in a while. But, you know, the bank that you would recognize, you know, on the corner is the bank we probably deal with. Key Bank, no. You know, they have their own financial structures in place that they can hire somebody to do this sort of thing internally full-time, right? They're just bigger. So there are 5 levels. Least. Can anyone guess what least means? Oh, come on. Least risk. You're involved in activities that are absolutely nearly zero cybersecurity risks, right? Can anyone guess what most means? No, this is your operations. This is not how you're doing the operations. That's the questions. This is what kinds of operations you're involved in. Most is an organization that is probably international, branches all over the world, thousands of internet connections to all their facilities. They do cash transfers, they do electronic transfers. They are involved at the most sophisticated level with the highest volume of customers, the highest volumes of transactions, the most risk-prone activities. Can they do those activities successfully? Yes. But the fact that they're doing those activities adds a layer of threat to them that they have to account for. So between the least, which is basically you're not doing anything sophisticated, to the most, where you're doing everything under the sun that's sophisticated, that's the range. And you'll see how the range meshes in with the answers on the questions, which is why it's important that this was broken up into 2 parts.
Who makes the determination?
I will show you. Okay. The risk categories themselves, right? Those were the prior screen. Those are the results. All right, which one of these columns are you going to be in? Least, minimal, moderate, significant, or most. Those are your qualifications. All right. how you figure out which one of those columns you end up in are based on these categories. A bunch of questions, there's 39 questions all involved in the inherent risk profile. 39 questions that they have to answer, and they're spread across these questions, these categories: technologies, delivery channels, online and mobile products, organizational characteristics, and external threats. So again, see, it's not just the technologies, it's how the organization is structured and how the organization performs. Those are the different categories that you have to answer the questions in for inherent risk, and then the end result will tell you which of those general 1 through 5, the least to the most, you qualify in. And then that will tell you which questions you're supposed to be able to answer yes to. Okay? It all does come together. I got a black screen. Oh, sorry. No, it's timed. Okay. So 39 total items in the inherent risk. The items in the inherent risk are fact-based. Do they have this number of connections? Do they have this number of branches? Are they in more than one state? How many employees do they have? All fact. Based. How are your questions, James? Most of the regional financial institutions end up in minimal, all right? They don't do the kinds of transactions. They don't have the diversity of geography or cross-boundary borders that, you know, a bigger bank would have. So most of the banks that we deal with, Sage deals with here in this region, they're all going to be minimal. Okay. Minimal bank, about $1 billion or less in assets. Sounds like a lot of money, doesn't it? There are banks that only have $200 million in assets that are minimum. Right? How profitable they are and how much assets they have under management is a function of their history. How long have they been in business? How aggressively have they grown? You know, when you start getting up to over $1 billion in asset, you're just big. You have multiple states, you have multiple geographic locations, you have a larger staff, you have more facilities, you're into more sophisticated stuff. Most of the regional banks are going to be minimal. It is. Yeah, the second level from the bottom. Most are the TD banks, Bank of America. They're really large people. Wells Fargo, $185 million fine, not a problem. Oh, the executive that was in charge of that entire division while this was going on, she can take a retirement at a $125 million package. Won't even notice it. Yeah, we don't do any work for those guys. But those are the guys who would be in the most category, right? They're not going to share their inherent risk profile assessment with me, but they probably have 25 people on staff just to calculate it. Although it doesn't take 25 people. All right. So I'm not sure if you can see this really well. It's kind of hard to get all the detail on the slide. This is just a slice of one of the documents. Let's see if there's the best way for me to show this to you. Now this does fancy stuff, right? Okay, can't do the fancy stuff. That's all right. I need more training, Ryan. Come on, man. So this is a slice out of the technology connection types, right? How many ISP connections do you have? None. Oh, well then, for this row of the 39, you'd be at least, right? Oh, well, you've got more than none? You've got up to 200? Oh, well then, your risk on this row is significant, okay? What the bank needs to do, and what we ask them to do, is we ask them to sit down with this form without us being around, because these are all fact-based issues. Sit down with this form, figure out what you're actually doing, give us this form back with these boxes checked. Only one check per row, please, right? Fill it out, right? With these answers, how many external connections that are unsecured? Do an FTP, Telnet, or login? Hopefully it's none, right? But some folks, for reasons that we don't have any control over, have apps and whatever that require them to have maybe 10 customers that have to have that kind of connectivity to them. They need to provide an honest answer. Once all of these items are factually known, there's an algorithm that the FFIEC provides that says, okay, how many leasts, how many minimums, how many moderates, how many significant, how many mosts did you score out of 39? The algorithm then says, oh, you're a moderate risk for everything, or you're a minimum risk, or you're a least risk, whatever you answer, right? So the FFIEC is already predetermined, when you look at all 39 questions, where you need to end up. So I could answer significant here, I could answer minimum there, and I could answer moderate there. Truthful answers about how I operate the business is what we're looking for under the inherent risk. And then once we have all 39 answers, we calculate our result. Okay? Yeah?
Is each question weighed the same? Every one of 39 is the same weight?
No, they're not weighed the same. I'm not privy to the actual math that they put into the algorithm, but most of the organizations, even if the answer most on a couple of these, they will still come out as minimum. Right? The organizations that we've done the assessments with, I have not yet had anyone who's been higher than minimum, because the answer lowered down often enough that the balance comes out per the FFIEC that it's a minimum. All right? If we had a regional bank or a local bank that ended up being a moderate or a significant, especially if it was a significant, I'd have really questions if they understood the items that they were being asked about on this form. It's really hard as a regional organization to have 100+ connections to the internet. Figure you had 10 branches, if you had 100 branches, right, plus, 4 data centers, then you're getting pretty big, right? But, if you're answering significant or most on some of these, either you're not understanding what they're actually asking you, which is one of the roles of the advisor when we're talking this through with them, or they really are not the right size to be a regional bank. Okay. That's the inherent risk profile. So you come up with an answer. Go right ahead.
This whole exercise of risk, is it setting the parameters at which the next step has to be? So basically, the term risk isn't the term I think of risk.
Correct.
The term risk here is more of, I'm setting the boundary
Yes.
for the next step.
Yes.
You have to fit your activities within that next section on that.
Absolutely
Risk is
right.
actually within the risk here, it's more like the service risk of your organization, or
The inherent risk. The term that they use is inherent risk. Because of the things that you do, we've judged your risk, overall risk level to be in this bucket. Minimum, least, whatever it ends up being. Because you'll see as we get into the questions how they actually break this out. Boy, you guys are thinking just like the feds. That's amazing. Isn't that scary? Quite frankly, I thought this was ludicrous when it was first introduced to me last year. I've only been working on this since October last year, right? But the more I get into this, I have studied the 494 questions. I've looked at all the papers on all the interpretations on this stuff. This is actually a really solid framework and a uniform process that if they took this and applied it to any other industry, it's applied to banking. You could apply this to healthcare. Just change some of the risk parameters, right? You could apply this to, as a framework, to telecoms, right? The federal government could say, hey, we like this model. The wording needs to be a little bit different, but this could be applied as a uniform assessment across any industry stack. Right now, they're just using it for finance, and I have no idea if they plan on using it for some other industry. But right now, it's a really solid framework, and when they modify it, it'll probably even get better. Yes, sir.
They actually already do it across multiple industries. Because if you're a critical service provider to a financial institution, you can walk in and say, you're not regulated, congratulations.
That's right.
So they regulate insurance companies
Yep.
that underwrite financial risk.
Yep.
And they definitely regulate third-party technical service providers.
They have to have that in. You have to be connected to the financial industry in some service provider aspect or other third-party aspect, and then they can apply this to you. Excuse me, person you have a contract with in the financial industry has to apply it to you. And that's actually in the assessment. How are you treating your third-party vendors? Are you getting the information you need? Are they running their operations as securely as they should? Absolutely right. You take it like the feds, man. Come on. All right, so the cybersecurity maturity, it's also split into 5 sections, right? And as we get in, the 494 questions are not evenly split between all 5 of these sections. There's questions about how you do risk management and oversight, threat intelligence and collaboration, cybersecurity controls. These are the technical controls about how you run your operation. The external dependency management, the third-party stuff. Who are you doing business with, and how are their controls, and how is your auditing and inspection of their controls? And then incident management and resilience. Do you have the capacity to deal with bad things happening? And if so, what's the limit of your capacity to deal with those things? Okay. That's really hard to read. Again, I apologize. All these documents are available from the FFIEC.gov site. Just search for Cybersecurity Assessment, and you'll see the 5 bazillion things. The other thing is, did you know your federal government's on YouTube? The FFIEC, the FDIC, the NCUA, they all have YouTube channels. And they actually have YouTube videos that are really nice and explaining all the different things that go into all the different kinds of regulations, all the different kinds of rules, what the boards of directors should be doing and shouldn't be doing. And they have some that talk to the FFIEC assessment process. So you can see why these people are in federal service and not necessarily in Hollywood. But, if you have an interest in seeing what your federal government's producing, to try to get the word out on all their different kinds of programs, not just this, but everything else that they're doing in the regulatory world, it's a good place to spend some free time. Better than cat videos. All right. So, did I insult somebody? Sorry. Baseline, evolving, intermediate, advanced, and innovative. So, let's take a guess. Who has to answer yes to innovative? What? The ones with the most risk. If you've been qualified as most, the expectation is you're answering yes to innovative. Who needs to be answering yes to baselines? Everybody. Absolutely everybody. The 494 questions, a big chunk of the ones that are baseline questions, are actually requirements that have been in the handbooks since the 1990s. If your organization is not accomplishing successfully the baseline items, then you've been out of compliance for cybersecurity forever, right? Everyone should be 100% baseline. Now, not everyone is 100% baseline, but now the federal government will know who those people are, right? Evolving, intermediate, and advanced, the intermediate levels, depending on where you are in your organization, and we'll show you that closer to the end of how the stuff meshes together, you should be answering yes. A minimum size bank, minimum risk, should be 100% baseline, nearly 100% involving, in my opinion, and working hard on getting all the intermediates done. It's interesting that there are organizations that are not baseline, but they're answering successfully yes on intermediate questions. Isn't that weird? Their IT organization, their risk organization, has focused on doing some things that allow them to answer advanced questions yes, but they don't have baselines answered as yes. All right? Not everyone is on the same page, literally, on what they should be doing as baseline, evolving, and intermediate. We expect to see that change. We don't expect them to necessarily stop doing the advanced, but we do expect them to focus on getting at least all the baselines done and as many of the evolving as they can practically get done. Okay. It's a circle of life, right? Baseline, everybody. Evolving, most people. Intermediate, more than a few. Advanced and innovative. If you're that size, you're not talking to someone at Sage. But the regulators are going to want to see that you've confirmed that you are actually answering truthfully to the advanced and the innovative. I actually had one customer tell me that their auditors, their external auditors that are not the examiners, right? Does everyone know that the examiners are from the regulatory bodies? The auditors are the people that the bank is supposed to hire to check where they are at before the examiners show up. That's the level of regulation that they're under. They have their own internal processes. They bring in outside auditors to check on things and give them a report, and then the examiners show up and double check everybody's stuff. Right? That's regulation. You know, but it keeps the money safe, right? Anyway. Okay. Baseline represents minimum security requirements. Requirements are embedded in the multiple handbooks that have been issued since the 1990s. If you're not doing baseline, you got something wrong in your organization and you're going to have to fix it. And everyone recognizes that. When we talk to them about that they're missing 5, 10, 20 baselines, they know that they should have been doing it and they just haven't. But now they're on record of knowing that they should have been doing it and they haven't, and now they're working on it. Right? 494 statements. Answers are yes, we met the statement, or no, we did not meet the statement. It's very black and white. There's no partial credit. All right?
The questions are all that detailed. Can't be partially.
There's no gray. You either are doing it this or you're not doing it. There's no partial credit. That's one of the things that I heard in the last couple of weeks from institutions we work with, that when the institutions are talking to the regulators, which we don't participate in, they're asking for partial credit. Regulators have not approved that they will get partial credit. But they might work it out with a new Congress. Okay. Minimum inherent risk, not expected. Answer yes to any of the advanced or innovatives. FFIEC has articulated an expectation that financial institutions should be operating in a range of compliance. All right. That's the range. This is directly from their materials. Okay. If you qualified as least, this is your range. If you qualified as minimum, this is your range. Qualified as moderate, oh look, you don't even get to claim that your baseline. That's a given. You should have everything involving done and be working on intermediate and advanced. Significant risk, that's how you run. There you go. Most risky, everything you're on the hook for. You should be answering yes to advanced and as many of the innovative as you possibly can.
So what's the incentive for someone in the least range to try to get to the higher level risk levels?
They don't have to, because they're not doing those operations that would make them more at risk. All right? And that's one of the beauties of the design of the assessment.
Incentive to that statutory perspective. So we're talking. So there's no incentive for them to be forward-leading in terms of reducing their risk to their environment.
I think when you see some of the questions, you will realize that there are things that someone in the least category could not possibly be engaged in because their business operations don't overlap in those activities. Okay. So, minimum, we advise folks, 100% baseline is the minimum that you need to be doing. Try to get all the evolving done. Last year when we started these with our clients, we were advising them to get evolving before the end of this year, with an expectation that they should be working on intermediates and being successful at intermediates in 2017. A lot of this stuff can't be done instantaneously. It's not necessarily a matter of writing a policy or turning a switch on something. It's changing your business practices and your business organization to meet some of these needs. Yes?
So when they're done the assessment, are they being rated in those risk categories, or do they get a composite numerical score?
It's a service we offer that we give them both.
Because if they were asking for partial credit, unless they were using some kind of numerical score that would make sense, because in that area, partially, that just means they are, part of those controls.
Yeah, we don't give partial credit, but those 5 domains, right, we will tell them, oh, you're 85% compliant in this one. you're 100% compliant in this other one. All the baselines, are you 100% compliant or are you 80% compliant? We do the math for them, so they have the holistic number of across all the domains, right? And then we give them the number that's a breakout of where they're supposed to be, right, for their risk area, all right? So yeah, they see the stats. They really like the stats. The stats look good. Presentation is really important when you're talking to a board of directors, right? All right, so here's a baseline. Here's some samples of baseline questions. Do you know any organization who can't do this? Any organization that can't do that? I would hope no, right? But this is baseline. No, you don't have to tell us who your clients are. It's all right. Okay, so we come in and we say, are you doing this? Is this a yes or a no? If it's a yes, we document whatever the process is. How often does that committee meet? How often do they generate the report? So that they have a concurrent record of doing the assessment of, you know, how they get to yes on this. If the answer is no, we try to document why, for business reasons, they have to say no on any of these questions. All right, which goes into the action plan that we give them at the end of our report compile that basically gives them all the things that they need to work on and how they're going to work on it. Evolving question. Do you know somebody who can't do the second bullet? Cybersecurity. Is it part of the budget process or is it ad hoc? That's evolving, right? Who has a separate cybersecurity budget? There you go. It's probably usually the IT budget, yeah. So again, these are federal questions. They phrase them as declarative statements. Do you do this or don't you do this? Right? We help them document whether they're doing it, and if they're doing it, how. If they're not doing it, why. That's part of the assessment process that we follow. They could go through the free form and say yes, yes, no, no, yes, yes, no. That doesn't really help them get better, right? So for the evolving, that's an example of the kinds of questions. All right.
Is there the concept of companies in the banking industry? You ask companies that wouldn't be able to give one of these reports on the state of their information security. Small companies, small private companies wouldn't be able to do that.
If they're a financial industry and they're regulated by the feds in the state, they have to be able to answer yes. It's baseline.
Okay.
Have to be able to answer yes. If they're not answering yes, they're going to have problems. They probably already had problems. It just is bringing it to light. All right. So, advanced questions. Do you know anyone who could do this innovative one? Leading efforts to create new sector-wide information sharing channels to address gaps in external-facing information sharing mechanisms. Anyone want to be involved in that kind of operation? There you go. It's innovative, right? You know, I don't personally know anybody here. I did know some people down in Massachusetts that were doing this sort of thing. Right? Amazing work that they were doing. Absolutely amazing. You know, none of the regional banks will ever be expected to answer yes to that question. They simply don't have the time and the resources, and the FFIEC understands that. That's why it's an innovative item. Right? Do we know anybody who would do this? Network of trust, established to evaluate information about cyber threats. A little bit less formal, a little bit less structured, but are there organizations who could be doing that?
Let me ask you this, Chuck. So if I were to go on, if I want to go on the FSI side, for instance, would that satisfy that
Are you contributing to FFIEC? Are you just seeing the emails?
So I'm dumping it into the intelligence bureau, to their Delta. I'm taking things, IOPS and things, and dumping it into their intelligence bureau. Is that the kind of thing that?
That's the kind of thing,
and
yes.
would satisfy that requirement?
Yeah, depending on the extent and the formality that you're using to actually participate. Yeah. Yeah, if all you're doing is getting the email, no, that's not a relationship.
If you're pushing up, it's.
Yes. Under my interpretation, yeah. Your examiner may disagree.
What level of evidence do you maintain?
The really nice thing is that we're only doing an assessment. We are not doing an audit,
I'm
right?
talking about you, I'm talking about the business.
We try to give them some guidance on the sorts of things that they need to be able to prove they're able to do. So if someone told me, oh, yeah, we do this. Yeah. And I ask them, okay, how are you doing it? What are the external nonprofits you're working with? Are you working with MITRE? Who are you working with that you're establishing sector-wide channels, right? How are you doing that? And if they don't have an answer, you have to call bullshit, right? We don't have to collect their evidence. We don't have to audit their evidence. But we're not a wet rag that's just going to check the box for them. That's not.
You answer yes to that, the regulators come in and say, prove to us that you're doing this.
We are helping them with the assessment. We are not representing them in front of the regulators.
That's in the
That's not
handbook.
my question.
Yeah, that's in the handbook. The handbook is actually their audit guide.
Yeah.
So that would give you a basic level of what they're looking for, some type of overarching policy and standard and evidence to show that it's actually done in process and in practice with some type of management oversight.
Yeah.
And are you supposed to keep some sort of binder of all your evidence so they can come in,
Well, it depends on what it is. For something like this, they probably want to see the minutes.
present it on demand type?
Yeah. If you're actually doing stuff like this, you have records of who's involved, how often they're doing it, what the results are, and they're measuring the success or the effectiveness of it. It's part of their operational activities. Okay. Not too much in the privacy area for this, though. Sorry. Okay. As I've already covered, financial industry has been regulated for a really long time, in some fashion or another since finance started in this country in the 1700s, right? The cybersecurity regulations have been in effect, those handbooks from the 1990s, probably almost as long as the military has had very specific IT requirements applied to them. Who's being more successful at it? It's hard to say. I don't know that the military or the government has applied this assessment to themselves, but it's not a bad framework. And the benefit is, of course, everyone's answering the same questions. Everyone's looking at the same risk matrix and figuring out where they're at. And as the examiners come back and get all that information and take it back to the big databases in the sky, they will start being able to, over time, compare apples to apples. Hey, regional bank in New England, they're all 100% on baseline. Regional banks in the Southwest, 80% of them are not 100% on baseline. Why is that? They'll be able to compare sizes of organization, inherent risk in the organization, and the activities of the organization against where they are on the controls. And at some point, they'll start requiring the controls to actually have the bite of enforcement. At this point, there's no enforcement, at least not explicitly. Okay. We've already talked about that point. Where's my guide?
So part of this process is each institution must log on to a website and upload their scores and their answers or something?
No, the examiners will ask for the report on how they did.
Doesn't get to be, I don't count.
Examiners come to everybody. It's a regularly scheduled activity. Every institution has both their internal auditors and federal and state examiners come to them on a scheduled basis. A lot of the financial institutions plan their business cycles around the examiners' expected arrival dates. Oh, we won't be doing anything else. Our examiners are in town for the next 3 weeks. Yes. Oh, sorry. Oh, yes, Andrew. Yeah, you can be surprised by an examiner, especially if they think you're in trouble. Right? Now, they don't have enough examiners to run surprise inspections on everybody. It just doesn't happen. But yeah, it's kind of like an IRS audit. You know, sometimes you'll get randomly picked for a surprise audit. The examiners can pick you as a surprise exam, but usually it's a calendar basis. See that?
Did you see his follow-up, John?
Oh. Oh, you can't leave it at that, Andrew. You got to tell us what kind of members you have. Oh, he's typing. Oh, okay. Who is DFAS? Does anyone know? Oh, okay. Cool. Defense Finance Services. All right. Excellent. I think there was a question over here.
Yeah, I was thinking at the topic of SWIFT. I know that the issues that we've been seeing from this are overseas. How does this play into those transactions? How would this help secure that? Why wasn't it?
Well, the thing that happened in Bangladesh, you know, no one in this country has any accountability for it because, as I'm sure you know, I don't know if anyone else here remembers the news stories. SWIFT is the financial funds exchange system, which allows international movement of money based on a trusted communication from one bank saying, hey, move this money for me to this other account, going to another bank, and then the money being ping-ponged around electronically between the different banking systems. Bangladesh, Bank of Bangladesh, yeah, it was the clearinghouse bank, right? Someone crafted some very sophisticated, purpose-written malware, which allowed them to get to the machines that operated the SWIFT transactions, and then they issued communications saying, hey, send this money to these locations for the Bank of Bangladesh. And the system worked as designed to get authenticated communication from an authenticated bank who had money in the New York Fed branch, and they started sending the money out to the associated accounts that they were instructed to. So I don't know that that's a fault of the SWIFT system, but certainly the people in Bangladesh were not following good practices.
What happened was the critical factor was the routers in the central bank of Bangladesh and all the passwords. And that's how malware jumped. Right. So once it launched it, they memory the network, saw the routers, and they had no segregation.
Yeah.
They had no segregation, jumped over to that router, and they found it there.
Yeah. So to answer your question, Gary, when you go through all 494 questions, there are questions about, are you using multi-factor? Do you have segregation, right? That the basic, what we would think of in this country as basic cybersecurity protections are part of the questions that the bank has to address. So, you know, if you have a bank that never does an international transaction, would never be involved with SWIFT, you know, do they have to address the advanced and innovative kinds of questions? You know, no, they don't. But the basic cybersecurity stuff, they still have to do that. They still have to do that. I don't know. I don't think it's part of the UN Charter to do an international banking system. SWIFT is international. It's a built purpose for that. But whether they can enforce operational behaviors on the part of their member banks across the world, I don't know. That's a good question. Does anyone know? Is there some international framework like the FFIEC?
Safeguards you have to have in place to compare the SWIFT network.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you open up the SWIFT network, those transactions obviously, so that's why you have $1 billion of unmarked bills going to Iran, because they moved it off the SWIFT network.
Yeah.
It's part of the sanctions. It's the same thing with Russia.
Yeah.
So there, in terms of safeguards, SWIFT has a whole host of different applications you plug into the SWIFT network and so you have to have those safeguards in place to be able to plug into the SWIFT network. So, and you're right, it did what it was supposed to do. It found the problem before it actually was able to resolve it.
Yeah. Well, human observation, right? Some guy in Germany.
You can't agree with me
Yeah. Well, in this case, it saved them from losing like $3 billion or something like that. Yeah. They lost several hundred million, I think, but. Yeah.
What about U.S. banks that are international? So banks that are overseas, would those, like, could you do federal audits on those banks overseas, or?
If they're chartered here, or they have a facility that's chartered here.
In the U.S., even if it's abroad.
Yeah, our laws only apply to folks who are chartered here, and if they've got facilities overseas, this assessment takes that into account, right? So if you've got something that's out of the state or out of the country, you're going to be answering significant on most.
Covered under those questions.
Yeah. Diane, did you have a question?
No, I don't.
Okay. So cool.
Well, for banks, international banks that do business here,
They have to be chartered here if they're going to participate here. I don't think that they get a different set of rules, but I don't know if they're going to be required to do the FFIEC assessment. They wouldn't, for banks that large, they wouldn't have any problem answering these questions, you know. And I would be surprised if they answered yes to all the innovative, because some of them are really optional kinds of activities. Are you participating with academia to develop new open source patches? You know, stuff like that. I mean, you know, if they're not very generous in their non-core banking activities, they'll probably answer no to some of those innovative questions. But there wouldn't be any reason for them not to look at the assessment. And as I mentioned, a lot of institutions that are not covered by the FFIEC could benefit from just looking at the kinds of questions and the risk assessments that this assessment, the risk factors that this assessment looks at to see if you could leverage something out of it. You know, all sorts of different kinds of institutions could benefit. Right? The framework itself is a really clever idea. You separate the inherent risk from the technical controls and the organizational controls, and then you bring them all back together.
How many SAGE, how many of these have SAGE?
A lot. The original assessment takes an entire day. I'm sorry?
That's a factor-based question.
But there are proprietary secrets and there are competitors in the room.
I wouldn't answer the question if I were you.
And this follow-up question is, can you share, like, what's the biggest sort of surprise that you encountered conducting one of these audits?
That there were some institutions that couldn't meet the baselines, and there were some institutions that were actually legitimately answering yes to advanced and innovative questions. It's like, really? You do that? How do you do that? Yeah, I guess that's a yes on advanced or a yes on innovative. You know? Oh, you don't do that? Really? You simply have chosen not to do that for the last 40 years? Okay, so that's a no on that baseline. I can't show you one of our reports because they're proprietary for the clients we do them for, but when we do the report, one of the FFIEC items that I didn't put in here is that if you answer no to any of the silos, if you answer no to any of the baseline questions or the evolving questions, no in any of that, no credit at all. If you answer no to a single baseline question, you are not baseline. You won't be baseline until you answer every single question yes. Same for evolving, same for intermediate. There's no partial credit. You don't get partial credit on each individual questions. You don't get partial credit for any of the categories. A no is a no. You know, when you present that really nice chart with all the red in it to the board of directors, they have some interesting questions, right? You know, we missed one question and we're still red. Why is that? FFIEC says you have to answer everything yes if you want to be green in this category. Get that one answer yes before next year. You'll be all right.
Some of them, it's like, give me the question, I'll answer it right now.
You know, it is our work product for their benefit, but we won't give someone a work product that we can't justify that was a good answer. Yeah, they can answer the actual questions for the FFIEC any way they want, but we won't alter our report. They can't alter our report to say, hey, yeah, we actually answered that yes after Jock left the room. You know, my report will still show it as no, and they can't change it. So, yes.
How much it's costing institutions to
Well, it's brand new. It's only started last year. These are all activities they're supposed to be doing, and as I think I've already explained, they're already used to auditors, they're already used to examiners, they're already used to people coming in and telling them they're doing it all wrong, and they got to do it differently. So for financial institutions that have any level of maturity, this is normal business activity for them. The fact that they're now answering the same questions that every other peer in their in their environment are answering is actually a good thing for them. They like that. They're waiting for the results of all their peers to be published at some point by somebody so they can see how they are doing. It's really interesting when you sit in a room and people say, well, we could or couldn't do those 5 things that you're recommending. What are our competition doing? How do we compare with these other 4 institutions that we compete against here, right? I can't answer that for you. Sorry.
I'm wondering how is this is a new, it's a new procedure, right? So how is it disseminated to all these charter organizations such that they know, hey, this is new, but we have to do this. This is important.
Oh, the federal government is talking to these institutions on a daily basis between their websites.
I don't know how many financial institutions across the United States.
It's all of them.
Significant.
Yeah, it's all of them. It is literally every financial institution. If you've got a state or federal charter or both, you have to follow what the FFIEC is telling you you have to do, right? They published this assessment in June 2015. Oh yeah. The handbooks and the booklets and yeah, no.
This is the knock-on of the voluntary critical infrastructure cybersecurity stuff. Yeah, so that was all voluntary, except for if you're in a critical infrastructure area, your regulator regulates you to that. And in 2014, they did 500 assessments before really rolling this out.
Yeah, they piloted it. Yeah.
There's like 3,500 charter institutions in the United States.
Yeah.
They did a small percentage, and now everybody gets them on their annual cycle. So to answer your question, you know when your next exam is, a year in advance, and they tell you, we're going to be back, and you're going to have to do this. It adds an extra week to your assessment. So instead of having the auditors on site for 3 to 6 weeks, it's 4 to 7. It's fun. You should do it.
It is fun. I really enjoy it. It takes about a day to go through 494 questions and appropriately capture their answers, right? And then we set aside about 2 weeks to generate the report, peer review the report, internal processes. You guys aren't familiar with that, right? QA the report, and then and if at some point, if there was low-hanging fruit, if there was something that all they had to do was publish a policy or get the board to actually sign off on something that was sitting in front of the board but they didn't do it yet, we can adjust the report before it goes final if they can do the low-hanging fruit between when we do the interviews and we actually need to publish the final report. So, you have a question, David? Cool. All right, that's all my time. Thank you very much. It's been fun. Next up is Rick. We're going to do a round table. He's going to tell us all about the threats. Well, round robin. How's that? So he's got a presentation. It should be on the same stick that I gave you. I will, yes. Good plan. I am no longer mic'd.
No longer mic'd? Do I have to be mic'd? You do? I do. Well, we get people. We got 3 people.
Oh, that's right, we got
Plus,
people.
we got a recording going.
Oh my
we do.
We got
Okay.
4 people going. Look at that. If you have any questions about the FFIEC, you want me to go through all 494 questions with you, I'd be happy to do it.
I did want to know, say, you know, institution classified as minimum, do they still have to answer all 494 questions?
They don't have to answer yes, but they have to answer all questions. Yes.
Is that your hat?
It's my hat.
That's a nice hat.
Why, thank you.
See those down in Miami all the time.
I'm going to get those out.
What's that?
Stealing your thunder.
Yeah, still my thunder.
There's a pointing device if you want to.
Okay.
You can point, you can draw, or you can do nothing.
Do you have to touch the board to do
You
it?
have to touch the board.
Okay. Is there a highlighter? I mean, a laser?
No,
the one thing it doesn't have, right?
no laser.
You would ask.
Well, because you couldn't see it at home.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. I don't need it anyway. I was
So
just.
exactly this.
Okay.
So if you don't want to draw,
No, I don't need to. Pretty cool.
there it goes.
And then just paged up and down and.
Yeah, you can mouse click here,
Yeah.
or you can take that thing and click here.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
Okay?
Nice. Thank you.
And we're recording everything you're saying.
Okay, no swear words.
No swear words, no cussing.
No cussing.
They get what's coming up. So what I'm saying is, right? Or what type of thing if graduation, some guy says, hey, I'm gonna open a basic house. Okay, that's good, you'll get your quota. Well, how do you do that? And it increases like that. Yeah, you're not stealing, you put the money here and take it back. People that charge fees, their account balances. Yeah.
Yeah.
But somebody else puts a bad actor moving money out, and then the customer got charged a fee because their account balance. Whatever, but that would be your fee.
What's that? I don't work for this guy anymore. No, they, I'll explain. I was bought out. It's kind of a long story. It's a good story. Yes, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. They were going in a new direction, and there was more opportunity for me out of that space because I saw some bigger and better things. So I found a home with Barry Dunn, and that's actually been a real good challenge for me. It's getting me back into more of a direct client relationship role, which is what, when I had talked to Sage, is what I had wanted to do as well. So, yeah, it's from a strategic perspective, it's a much broader role. So I'm doing a lot more broader strategic planning, in security, cybersecurity strategy in terms of pulling a lot of pieces together for the government and then being able to give them a roadmap on how to, because you'd be horrified what's out there. It'd frighten you. Yeah. So in a way, and on paper, it looks like I'm going backwards in a way, but I'm really not. I'm actually, I have more opportunity, with a lot more entrepreneurial leeway than I did in the past. So you'll actually be hearing about WAPAC pretty soon. So they just put out a project that I was working on before I left, is a threat intel API. So they're taking all their indicators and, yes, so yeah, that's a project they've been working on for a long time. But yeah, we'll talk about it. Yeah, we'll talk about it sometime. When I'm not mic'd up. So you gonna bandana from the FFIEC rules?
I am gonna bandana from that.
He won't land. He'll never land the plane. Well, I just want to make sure everyone gets. I never do. You know that. I'm awful about that.
You just update us like that. Link in with me, and you'll see him, and you can link in with him.
Whatever happened to the cyber cluster? Whatever happened to the cyber cluster?
So I talked to them about that.
Yeah?
And they said that they actually had, with the Coast Guard and stuff that they were doing for Portland Harbor, they had a very friendly audience with that. So they said, we appreciate it, but at the next stage, which is in October, that's when we might need some help.
Nice.
So.
Okay.
And I'll give a.
Are you still active over there? Are you?
I'll give a quick update on what we're doing at the cluster. We applied for another grant.
Okay.
In July. I'll give a quick update during the Down East Minute, but basically that was workforce development.
Yeah.
Cybersecurity workforce development. So it's a planning grant, like $250,000, just to put together a plan.
That's nice.
To create new cyber talent and put it out.
That's nice. That's good.
So, but we'll see. We don't know if we get the grant until October.
I didn't want to bug you about it. I just seeing you, and I think you tried to talk to Gary, and I said, that reminds me, I got to talk to Marshall about that. So, here you go. Ready to get started? All right, we'll get started. All right. Jocko, call your meeting to order. Call your meeting to order. I don't have a gavel. I only have this thing. Okay, all right. So Jocko's presentation was actually a really good segue for me because he's talking about the FFIEC and doing the assessments for FFIEC. I'm with Barry Dunn, and our group, and actually it's just going to be really awkward for me because I'm used to looking forward, but a little background about me. I'm a senior consultant with Barry Dunn, and a lot of our group here is represented. What we do at Barry Dunn is we do strategic security services. So we do risk assessment and compliance, NIST 800, the risk management framework. We go out and do audits mainly with the government sectors. And security program management and maturity modeling is a new service that we've been doing as well. So we're going out and actually doing assessing the maturity, which is in the FFIEC is built in. But we use the C2M2 model from the critical infrastructure space for the electric companies. My background is with ISC Squared for a long time now. I'm a fully qualified Navy validator and lead auditor for DoD systems. And I was a co-founder of Red Sky Alliance and WAPAC Labs. This is where I got my Intel background, was in WAPAC Labs, yes. And I'm a futurist. Yes, I'm a futurist. Link my LinkedIn profile. Master Director of Cyber Threat Intelligence for WAPAC Labs. And that's where I got my background, cut my teeth in threat intelligence. And threat intelligence has a really, really bad marketing connotation. A lot of people don't like it. So I didn't really want to give a threat intelligence brief. So I'm just going to give a quick threat brief on some of the things that I've been looking at for the last few months since the group is adjourned. This really is open. We came up with this idea in the parking lot the last meeting of the year and said, well, it may be a good idea to actually go through some of the things that are happening. Some of the things that are happening out there and just discuss at some level and just kind of try to get the group together and start thinking about some of the things that we're seeing from the threat perspective inward into your organization. So the objectives are really simple for me. I try to come up with a way to kind of scale it because we have very large organizations, we have very small organizations. So I kind of wanted to throw some things together that I think work and scale across the group here. But I'm open to ideas. This is really your 20 minutes a month. So if you have any ideas, please reach out to me. You can contact me or whatever. So I just put together a really quick objective list. Talk about what's being targeted, who's doing the targeting, the tools, how to detect it, protect it, some of the things that you can do for countermeasures against some of the things that are happening. There's a lot of things going on. Obviously, we hear about it all the time. You see it all the time. The folks at SAGE, and I'm sure you guys talk about it quite often. And a lot of stuff that you see in the news grabs a lot of attention, but it's not necessarily the things that you should be really worrying about. The DNC hacks, for example, those types of things kind of get everything lost in translation. They get in the static, and you kind of lose sight of really what's going on when your executive management team is saying, you know, what's this? How'd this happen? And you're thinking, I got other things to worry about than that. So I've been down that road too. So I just want to put a real quick list of what's happened in 2016 from a threat perspective. And these are some of the larger breaches that we've heard about. Not a lot of them really apply necessarily, but they're all really important in their own way. And I could go into each one of them, I won't. I think the most significant ones clearly are the ransomware. It has really exploded. I know talking to some people that deal with this on a pretty frequent basis, they see a lot of this now to the point where it's really, really difficult and can be very debilitating in terms of fighting it all the time. And if you don't have really strong policies and procedures in place, you're not really doing a really good job of educating your end users, it becomes a really big issue. A lot of places that we see in our sector that we service, in terms of the government sector, we know the government sector gets hit with this quite a bit because they're very, not all of them, but many of them are very low sophistication in terms of their protections. And on top of that, they have a tendency to have a lot of information that's very important to their and integral to their operation that directly affects them politically. So it's kind of an interesting target, right? So if the sheriff department gets whacked, as we've seen in Maine, they've been whacked before. Some of the sheriff departments, I believe Washington County was one of them. They don't have the sophistication to really protect and defend themselves, but at the same time, from a political perspective, you're better off just paying the fine and not creating a big political hubbub by trying to fight someone in the ransomware space. Healthcare is a really big issue. We're seeing a lot of targeting in that. SWIFT network, we talked about that. It's a really interesting one. The NSA hack is actually one that kind of went under the radar. So if you're not familiar with that, a group claimed that they were able to exfiltrate in some way, shape, or form, and if anyone has the specific details, please chime in. They were able to exfiltrate the tools that the NSA were using in the offensive side of the house. So the way the NSA works is they have an education branch, and that's the public-facing group. They have an internal defensive branch, and they have an offensive branch. The offensive branch are the folks that are responsible for finding 0 days. And if you do any reading about the way the NSA is designed and configured, all that configuration and all that modeling and all those things that they work on the offensive side is highly protected, highly secured, and it's isolated. So for someone to actually get the tool set out of the NSA, the word on the street in Washington is that it's most likely a mole, and it's a mole at a very high level. The defense is to get into that space and get stuff out, or it's almost nearly impossible to do. Why that's a significant breach is it's changed the way the NSA thinks about offensive capabilities. There's actually a demand that the NSA share 0 days that they develop with the public sector and the private sectors so they can protect their environments. There's some caveats to that. One of them is there's a whole list of questions they have to answer before they release them. Can we attack the adversary in another means? Can we do this? Can we do this? So there's a whole bunch of criteria before they release it. The stuff that they were able to get a hold of is stuff that they were holding on to. These are crown jewels that allow us in this country to have an advantage over our adversaries to be able to get into their networks. So damage control-wise, it's kind of a really big deal for us from a defensive perspective, because the idea is that now these tools are on the street, they can be used against us as well. So that's why it's a pretty significant breach, and one that really hasn't really been publicized, I think, nearly enough. But I would suspect that the fallout of the NSA attack, even though it's not being talked about a lot, will be felt, for a long time to come. So the other one that I really want to talk about and focus on is one that's kind of near and dear to my heart, is business email compromise. Is everyone familiar with that concept, with business email compromise? So you're not? Okay, so the way it works is, and I'll go through the way it works in the business email compromise is someone, an adversary, and generally it's a 419 Nigerian scammer. What they'll do is they will pretend somehow they will get into your network with a keylogger and take screenshots, and they'll start understanding your environment, who you talk to from a business executive perspective. So they're targeting CEOs and CFOs and those types of folks. When they really understand what's going on in the network and they understand who those people are, depending on the sophistication of the actor that's attacking you, they will then spring the trap. They will get someone in the organization to transfer a large sum of money, stat, and they'll do it in a language or in a way that will try to trick the person that it's actually you. So this is something that, does anyone want to chime in on that? Do you deal with this? You must deal with this.
I don't know if I want to comment on it. Specific term for it that have come up with, because they have really cool stuff in security. You're phishing, and then this is called whaling.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So you're looking at, and the way, I'll give you a really quick anecdote real quick, and I think I got a little time to tell this story. So I worked with a bank overseas, Northern European country, got a message, this is what happened. What ended up happening was a Nigerian scammer got into the home computer and the Gmail account of a bank executive and set up an account, looked at the bank executive's account, and actually started sending emails from his Gmail account, taking over the local, his home computer, and started sending emails from his home account to the bank to transfer money to Nigeria. That's how sophisticated, it sounds, it's not sophisticated because the tools they use are really simple tools. They're using KC keylogger, things that you would normally detect, but the way they use them in the social engineering aspect elevates the likelihood they're going to breach you, because they're very patient, they take their time, and they know that the payoff is really big if they can succeed. It's not like, give me half a Bitcoin. It's not like that at all. It's, I'm going to sit in your network, I'm going to understand your operation, and then when I'm ready, I'm going to get a lot of money. So it's one of those things where patience pays off for the adversary. So on this one here, the reason why I wanted to pick this one, it's just like the one that's kind of the one that's trending high right now, is this Olympic Vision campaign. You can go to Trend Micro's website. I have a link there, and I can send it along to anyone that wants it. So this particular one, this campaign is targeting North America, Middle East, and Asian Pacific companies, and it's not really advanced. The thing you have to think about these attacks is they're not advanced. They're using very simple tools. The part that's advanced about this is the fact that they're very evasive. The tools that they use are extremely evasive, and I'll get into that in a second. But what a lot of them they can do is they can grab a lot of information really quickly. So key logging, all your passwords. So if you have encrypted passwords, things like that, and you're logging into your ERP systems, they're owned. Once these key loggers are in place, they're owned. Not only that, they're sending screenshots. So if you ever go to a website that's actually hosting the data, so they host the data actually on compromised servers. So they'll push the files up to a compromised server so they can go back in and retrieve them. They never, they're not going to indict themselves. So you start looking at that information, you're saying, wow, I got all these key logs. I got this person here, and it's got the ID name of the workstation. It has the user who's compromised, has their password. when it was compromised. On top of that, it has a picture of their screen, a screenshot. What were they working on? And a lot of times when you look at the screenshots, it's ERP systems, almost always. And they don't even have to breach the ERP system. All they have to do is get the credentials, go inside the network, move laterally, log in with credentials from another workstation with that user. It's that simple. And where you saw this and why this is kind of near and dear to my heart, we originally saw this in the maritime sector. So the maritime sector's got some really big issues. Why the maritime sector, why are they targeted by Nigerian scammers? Because the maritime sector, the Nigerians know it really, really well. They know the transfer of oil. They know shipping very well. They're involved in that industry very heavily. So they're comfortable in that space. So from an attacker's perspective, it's always nice to be comfortable in the space you work with because you don't want to get caught, right? So that was a pretty enlightening thing when we worked with the maritime sector for a number of months, tracking a lot of this stuff down. Ultimately, the gentleman that I was tracking in Nigeria got caught over the summer. His name's Mike Gabb, and his infrastructure was pretty blatantly sort of in your face, kind of. He didn't have very good operational security, so he left a lot of breadcrumbs. Like, we had a picture of his social media, and he lives in what's the name of the city in Nigeria? Lagos, right? So he lived in Lagos, in like one of the poorest parts in Lagos, and he had a $200,000 Porsche, and and all that. He's driving around the dirt roads. So he wasn't very smart about it, but it was pretty interesting. But here are some of the things that these particular 419 scam malwares can do. Right here, if you can see it, I don't know if I can do this or not. So right here is the control panel for this particular piece of malware. So a lot of this malware is easily configured. If you have a specific target you're going after, you can configure that malware to target that organization, because again, you want to make your footprint as small as you can so you don't get caught. So you don't want a real big piece of bloated malware going across the network so they can find it. You don't want that at all. But this was an interesting one just because of some of the advanced features. This particular piece of malware from a 419 perspective is an interesting one because it's a little more sophisticated than we normally see. Some of the encryption algorithms that it uses in terms of trying to evade detection are pretty interesting. I believe this one uses .NET for encryption. It continuously changes itself. So if you're in the world of indicators, MD5 hashes, everyone's got an indicator. We all have millions of them, but they're hard to track. This thing here is constantly morphing itself and changing its MD5 hash. So once it's in the network, it's really hard to keep up with it because it's just making small changes to itself. This MD5 hash is changing all the time. If you're not familiar with that term, is every file has a signature based on a algorithmic computation that equates to this MD5 hash, and I'm probably bastardizing that pretty good, but that's pretty much what it is. And it's a unique identifier for every file. So once it's constantly changing, it's really hard to keep up with it because you only have so much IOX you can put into your system to keep, and it changes all the time. If someone's not looking for them, or they don't have protections in place to be looking for polymorphic malware and things like that, it's really difficult to detect. And it's able to inject code into legitimate processes, so it can hide itself in something that, to you and to your scanners really looks like something that's legitimate and should be there. So it never sets off an alarm. Let's see here. So some of the things that I wanted to walk through, a lot of this stuff is, after a while you look at enough of it, it's like, yeah, it's the same old stuff, same old stuff. But the important thing to take away from a lot of the things that you read online in terms of like Trend Micro, in my opinion, does a really good job of doing reports. They give you a lot of really deep information. They're one of the many that are out there, but I think they do a really good job of kind of elevating the discourse and what they do to give you a really good understanding of what you're really supposed to be looking for. So one of the things I wanted to do is take a look at what we look at in our profession, and that is comparing controls and environments to the NIST framework, the risk management framework. What are the things when someone gets breached, or what are the things that they should be looking at in terms of making their environment secure? What are those areas, those subject areas they should be focusing and concentrating on? So in this particular case, if you're trying to break the chain, if you will, in terms of getting that person not to click on a malware or not to go ahead and transfer a ton of money to someone they're not familiar with simply because they got an email from the CEO, pattern behavior. Security awareness training goes a long way. And it's surprising how many people still don't do a really good job of security awareness training. Continuous monitoring, always keeping an eye on what's going on inside of your environment and scanning the environment outside, belonging to one of the ISACs, we talked about that earlier, or belonging to a group like this where people can exchange and talk about things that are going on in the network so they can get an understanding, hey, have you seen this before? You know, do you know about this? Because there's only so many of us and there's a lot more of the adversary, to be honest with you. Yes, go ahead. Yes, I will. Great question. Yeah. So a lot of industries have their own information sharing and analysis centers. The FFIEC is the one I'm most familiar with, is the Financial Services Information Sharing and Analysis Center. They're actually the leading edge for the ISAC model, where they have their community of interest. How it works, and it's supposed to work, is that the community of interest, in this case the financial sector, they go and they send their information, their indicators of compromise, things that don't look right, their malware, executables that they find that are not correct, or they ask questions and they send it up to the information sharing center, and then analysts up there will take that information and they'll distribute that information throughout the information sharing center community. So I think last I checked, the ISAC, I think had 6,000 members globally. So they're a pretty big group. There's a lot of sharing going on. The maritime sector has their own. The ICS SCADA folks, critical infrastructure folks for the electric grid, they have their own. So there's a lot of these different sharing centers, and a lot of you may have a sharing center you never even looked at, an ISAC. I would encourage it. At the very least, you have other people in your industry that actually are looking at the same things that you're looking at. So I know the FSISAC is probably the most mature of all the ISACs. Penetration testing goes a long way in terms of what are the vulnerabilities out there, what are things that are going on in my network, what's my perimeter defenses look like, those types of things. The separation of duties. Does it make a lot of sense for someone, in some small organizations I get it, but does it make a lot of sense for someone to be able to cut a check for a lot of money without someone having at least some eyes or some checks in place? It's amazing. When I was looking at the oil industry, when they had this issue, I was shocked at and there's a lot of money in the oil industry, so I kind of get it. You can't have everyone looking at every, $20, $30, $40 million transaction, but there definitely should be some protocols in place when the CEO says, hey, can you send $30 million to, wherever, someplace you don't normally do business with? That would go a long way, particularly where you have these transactions that once they're out there, they're almost impossible to call back. It's gone. That money is just history. So again, it's just being able to think these things through. Boundary protection. This is a really interesting one. What you'll see a lot in these types of attacks, these BEC attacks, is that the person can't get access internally to the actual CEO or the actual person they're going to use to set up the operation. So what they'll do is they'll register a Gmail account and then spoof. And if you're not doing any kind of filtering and you're not educating people, hey, maybe I'll take a look at the header on this. Now granted, that's kind of hard, but security awareness, again, goes a long way. But you should have some boundary protections in place to be able to look for these types of things, what you allow, what you disallow. The other thing, too, is one of the things that you can do, too, and the risk framework calls this out, is that allowing the use of external email systems is generally a bad idea for the most part. It's hard today, particularly today in social media, but there's got to be some controls in place on what people should be allowed to do in terms of using an external email account. Are there any questions so far on this at all? You guys all looking at the clock. Hey, let's go. I get it.
Possibly speaking from experience, the
Possibly.
protection is the biggest thing. If you're publicly traded, your officers, your CFO, your CEO are all publicly listed. This is an automated attack at this point. So if you go in and you instrument your spam filter to not allow messages into the environment, where the display name is your CEO's name, but the reply to doesn't match your internal email domain, that will stop a lot of things.
Yeah, yeah. That's a great point.
One of the previous place I worked at, Hospital Corporation of America, one thing I thought they did that was pretty cool was any external email had external, like in huge capital letters in the subject line, and then we pretty much just educated users that, hey, if you're getting an external email, it's suspicious. View it as suspicious and send it to us. I mean, unless you're like dealing with a vendor and you get to reply or something like that.
That's a great technique too. You can really, I mean, I could do it. I'm not volunteering myself, but you could do a whole night on B, C, and the different environments that that are successfully breached through very simple techniques. I mean, you think about Casey Keylogger, if you're not familiar with it, it's been around forever. And these things they're not sophisticated. You're not talking Chinese APT, that are exfiltrating tons of money or tons of your intellectual property. These are very low, sophisticated attacks, but they're successful because, to my previous slide, no one ever thinks about, maybe we put some controls in place, follow some framework, follow the top 20. It doesn't matter, but do something. It's amazing how many organizations still, to this day, do not take this stuff too seriously. This is the leaderboard. So what I did was, I had a source give me the things they're seeing. What are they seeing today in an aggregate? So there's a lot of different environments here reporting this stuff in. And this is the trend line here, what's trending. Neutrino has been around for a long time, but there's a lot of different variants of neutrino. Cryptnik is an interesting one because it's a knockoff on a previous version. And what's interesting is it's been pretty successful. And it's actually driven the previous version, its knockoff cousin, down the list. So you're starting to see a trend downward of Cryptex being used. The Boleto malware spam is a pretty interesting one too. The Boleto is an example of a malware that was designed for a specific environment. And this particular piece of malware was designed for Brazil's Boleto payment system. And I got to do some more research into this, but the fact that it's number 2 on the list, something's happened. This thing has escaped its walled garden that it works in. But we see this a lot. We see this a lot from a regional perspective. Like NJRAT is a good example, is in Arabic. They still see NJRAT all over the Middle East because they're comfortable with it. You're comfortable in Arabic, that's what I'm going to use. So that's a good example of that type of malware. Well, it's a great question. When I wrote a report on the World Cup 2 years ago and the targeting that was going to occur at the World Cup, the Russians were working pretty heavily with the Brazilians, the boots on the ground in Brazil. Russians are really good at making money off ATM machines and things like that. So they actually used and partnered a lot with the people in Brazil to develop infrastructure to basically steal and rob and exfiltrate money out of Brazil during the World Cup. I don't know, my suspicion would be that could be a repeat of that activity, or Brazil's lessons learned. The folks that know Boleto really well, they have been able to learn from previous events from the Russians and taken that skill set and now are targeting infrastructure in their own environment. Yeah, the Russians would be, yeah, absolutely. I don't think I'd want my critical infrastructure exposed to them after the fact, right? Yeah, absolutely. And the Russians are good for that. Just ask the Ukrainians. So it's a great question, and it's pretty interesting from the Brazilians' perspective. I did a report on Brazil, like I said. Their infrastructure is an absolute nightmare, and I'm surprised that they pulled off the Olympics. I really am. I mean, all their infrastructure across the board is pretty bad. What's interesting is they're the first CERT, the Computer Emergency Response Team in Brazil. They're the first CERT to actually officially weaponize their Computer Emergency Response Team. They went full bore. They took a completely different approach to the United States. Our CERT is an offensive CERT. We will attack you. So that's a great deterrent. They have a general that's in charge of their CERT. It's a very militaristic group. And they're not afraid to, they hired a bunch of American malware people from the alphabet soups down there, invited them in to teach them how to do all this stuff. So a lot of contractors made a lot of money. It was kind of interesting. This one here is pretty interesting. I won't go into RIG because everyone, well, not everyone, but that's a pretty popular one. It's been around for a long time. Fraudulent tech support. The tech kangaroos. Have anyone heard this term, tech kangaroos? They're a group of Indian hackers. And what they've done is they're basically robbing people by creating tech support in India and then pumping it into malvertising and things like that and getting people to click, and when they need tech support, they'll go there and then they'll steal their credit card information and rob them. It's just kind of interesting in the sense that where we outsource a lot of our infrastructure to India, particularly tech support, the fact that they're using it against us now in that kind of way, I thought was kind of interesting. But when the job market goes south and you have a lot of people that are very smart and they know what they're doing and they understand the culture, they can take advantage of you. So it's pretty interesting. Let's see here. And it doesn't work. Boo. This one here is just one I threw up. Like I said, I really know where to go. I'm a geopol guy, so my background is geopolitical threat environments, looking at geopolitical from a very high level, targeting and things from, let's say, China's interests from strategic goals. Long-term, Russia's interests from long-term goals. Why is Russia in Crimea? Why is Russia in Syria? That's my background. I'm not so hard tech. I've tried, I just don't have the time. This is really interesting. So this term resiliency, are you seeing a lot of this term, Ed Marshall, resiliency? This is going to be the next wave of how we reinvent ourselves in IT, will be resiliency. So as the marketing folks, like IBM has already grabbed onto this. I think they actually stole the word for themselves now. Like it's copywritten. But this is going to be a big deal in resiliency. And the only reason why I brought this really up, because I thought it was kind of interesting. I follow the Chinese for a while now. They have some very interesting techniques. If you're working with a company in a foreign country and the Chinese show up with lots of Huawei gear and they say, oh, here you go, it's all free, you probably don't want to do business with that company. Because I'm telling you right now, you're going to have problems. The Chinese love to give free gifts, but they're not really free. I saw it in Venezuela. I saw it in Iceland. I've seen it in a couple other places. They love to give free stuff away, and it's all loaded with their offensive capabilities. And I've heard stories. But this was kind of interesting in the sense that if you're not familiar with what's going on in Yemen, the Iranians have pretty much taken over Yemen. They took advantage of a civil war that was going on there over the last couple of years, and they pretty much own that territory now. The Chinese, well, it may be a vast desert, but when you have the straits are pretty narrow. You can still shoot pretty far. It's about like that. But the Chinese now have opened up a military base in Djibouti. And actually, yes? You're from Djibouti? Okay, so you might even be familiar with this. Yes, that's great. I'd like to talk to you sometime. So the Chinese have actually opened up a base here. Now, why I find this interesting is, from a geopolitical perspective, is we know that the Chinese have pivoted. They have told the United States, we're not going to attack your infrastructure anymore. Well, at least the private sector. They still attack in the government. That's a given. But what's really interesting is they've actually shifted all their industry in terms of their cyber offensive capability, not all of it, but a lot of it. They're moving over to the Middle East because they have something that we want, and that is this relationship to be able to control the flow of oil out here from Saudi Arabia. I don't have a bigger map, but what's really interesting about this is the Chinese don't want us in the South China Sea. This is their bargaining chip. So what does this matter to us in Maine? Think about it. Oil is a big deal to the United States. So you're thinking about your operations, your long-term operations, and you're thinking about how does cyber play into this? Cyber plays a big role in this. Because what China does a lot of, they do a lot of targeting, do a lot of pre-targeting. So if you have industry in Djibouti, if you have friends in Djibouti, or if you still do business in Djibouti, that's kind of an interesting thing. You're going to want to know, are you dealing with the Chinese? Are you dealing with their surrogates? How does it impact, how does it affect my supply chain? Those types of things. So that stuff's really important to keep an eye on because it is all connected, believe it or not. It sounds all spy versus spy stuff, but it is still pretty interesting. So, but anyway. And this is my parting shot. The guys in my office have seen this enough. You're probably sick of seeing this. So, down near our office, I won't even tell I blocked out the organization. It was a financial institution. So I go down there and I'm milling about smartly, trying to convince my boss I'm working. So I go down there and I'm looking and I'm saying, wow, that's kind of interesting. Porsche, CEO, license plate number, name. If I want to target this bank, who do you think I'm going to go after? Hey, guess what? This is Bill from, Dharma Wrong. You have $100 off your next service just take this coupon in. Boom, you got them, you've owned them. And guess what? I guarantee you, when you're on a Porsche, you got bills to pay, you're going to want $100 off, right? That's a no-brainer. I saw this and I'm thinking, we don't think about physical security very often. We get kind of cloistered in the cyber world. But the reality is when you see things like this, I personally look at this and say, I wonder what the hygiene looks like in their network. How do they think about security? Does this matter to them? Maybe they never even thought about it before, I don't know. But if they're not thinking about it at this level, then kind of likely you're kind of thinking they're probably not thinking about it upstream either. It may not be baked into their culture. So, go ahead.
Actually, I watched a video very similar to this, where a guy would go around the car and he would gather all the information, stuff inside the car, a paycheck sitting right out in the open, anything sitting out in the open, he gathered all the information, went to the person who owned the car, told them about everything about themselves, and they were like, I know your social security number, I know how much you paid, where you were.
It's horrifying. And you think about it, it's like I jokingly said to our principal for our group, I said, if I really want to take out my competition, I'd plant a bomb on the corner building, right? That's what I would do. If I wanted to take it out, I'd just go blow up the corner of the building because that's where all your executives are. That's where all the horsepower is in the building, right? I mean, it's a sick way to look at it, but think like the adversary. And even at this really granular, sort of benign level, think about that. I mean, that's a pretty damning thing. Now, should you drive a Porsche? No, I'm not suggesting that at all. But at the same time, you got the big company name up there, and I got the Porsche, and I made it, Mom, look. I've arrived. But, yes. Yes. It wasn't me. So, anyway, this is kind of a format I decided to use. It may be effective, it may not be. Maybe we need more actionable information. I very much welcome any input because I have the title, but I'm no expert in this at all. I mean, I still learn every day. There's something to learn about threat intelligence, that horrible word, but there's always stuff to be learned. Go ahead.
Have you heard anything in particular about the field of athletics in the Netherlands?
Which, in what regards?
Well, we've been seeing a lot of stuff coming from the Netherlands.
You try, you,
Where they stand.
They
You
work in
mentioned India,
India,
but we
right?
don't.
no, that's it. Yeah, it's.
We don't see the India as much as the Netherlands. So I'm curious.
There's a lot of targeting going on I know that area of the world really well. That was my area. That was my area was Iceland, Finland, Sweden, Netherlands, that area. I've studied Putin. I understand his war game, the way they play chess. They are gutting that area of the world. So what you're probably seeing, I would suggest, I don't know what the malware variants are, but if you gave me the IOX, I probably could track it down for you. They are seeing spillage, you're seeing spillage from whatever that environment is going on over there. Because you got to remember, it's like Stuxnet. The NSA built Stuxnet to be very, very contained. And lo and behold, it jumped outside of the box, right? And next thing you know, Symantec and Kaspersky are talking about it. It's out of the environment. So Russians don't care about that. They care about their target. So that may be what you're seeing is that spillage of whatever the active campaign is. But the Russians are all over that area because they want the Danish Straits. They want to keep an eye on the Danish Straits. You bet you're seeing a lot of the Danish Straits, and you're probably seeing a lot of, I can't remember the name of the shipping industry. It's the pilotage in the Danish Straits. There's only one pilot for that entire region of the world. There are 70% of the Nordic people live within 100 kilometers of the port of Gothenburg. So if I'm going to target a country or the Netherlands or the Nordics, I'm going to target the port of Gothenburg. That is a really important strategic target for the Russians. Yeah. Did you have a question?
I was wondering what your thoughts were on, or I guess if you thought that the Chinese beginning a base in Djibouti had anything to do with them militarizing in the South China Sea. Like they were telling their citizens to prepare for war.
Yeah. Yep.
Those two were correlated.
They are. I believe they are. I mean, I can't with high confidence say they are. Yes. What we saw before China started building their bases in the South China Sea, we saw them very heavily targeting Vietnam and the Philippines, because the Vietnamese and the Philippines have a lot of infrastructure. The other thing that they were targeting the Japanese really heavily. The reason being is the Japanese, 90 or 94% of the liquefied natural gas that Japan runs its economy on goes through the South China Sea. It's a big deal. So when you see on TV, oh yeah, the Chinese are making bases, and you're wondering why we're sending an aircraft carrier within 10 nautical miles of that base, is because the president is flexing his muscle that we're not going to allow you to do this, because you really kind of threaten our interests in that region. It's not just about projecting force, it's also projecting the fact that we're going to protect those allies in the Pacific Rim. It's really important. Malaysia is another one the Chinese like to, I hate to pick on the Chinese, but let's face it, they're very good at what they do, and there's a lot of them, and they really understand from a global perspective, they really understand how cyber is part of their strategy for their overall objectives and goals. They really do, and they're really good at it. They're fascinating to study because they don't think like us. What's that? They're patient, it's true, because we think in terms of 4-year election cycles. They think in terms of 100-year dynasties. They can afford to wait, and they can wait us out because we're very, very impatient people. But anyway. Yes, it's ultimately leads to attack, right? But what they do is they collect a ton of information. They're just like us. They have a collection program. So they're 5-year cycles. So their economy runs in a 5-year cycle, and that 5-year cycle has specific targets that they want to meet economically or strategically. And what they do is they take their collection capabilities and they focus on that 5-year cycle. So they're just collecting as much information as they want. So it's sort of like a replay attack, right? So I'm going to collect everything I can, and I'll give you a good example. Prosthetics was a big deal. In Iceland, there's one of the blades that they make for like Prostoria, I think his name's Prostoria, right? The blades they make, they're made in Iceland. They were developed in Iceland. Well, the Chinese went into that environment and just sat there and didn't do anything. No one knew why. They were there. They found them in there. But when the 5-year plan came up and prosthetics was a big deal, boom, they turned on the malware and it was gone. They just completely just gutted it. So that's a good example of what they do. They'll embed themselves and they'll wait. Took all their information. Just completely packed up wholesale and just grabbed it and right out, yeah, it's their intellectual property. Yeah, exactly. And the economic, why develop and take all that time to develop when you can steal it and start building it the day later, right? So, yeah, they are good, very good at that.
I have a question about the NSA.
Yep.
I've heard a lot about how the NSA was actually holding export vulnerabilities on vendors and vendors.
Do the vendors need to know about it? Yes, that's true. They're not required. They're required, well, I take that. They're required unless the criteria is met. Cisco had a real hard time with this. Cisco has a really hard time with this because Cisco got burned. Microsoft got burned and a few others got burned because they were sharing information with the NSA. The NSA was taking that information, building their own offensive capabilities with those devices and those operating systems, and they weren't sharing back. Sound familiar? Right, exactly. Thank you. Is this okay? You guys like this format? Does it need to change? Okay. All right. Huh? I don't know. I might be, you know, who knows? I might be driving a Porsche is what I might be doing. So. Is there any questions online? No, I guess not.
Before you take it off, you can ask the guys online that if they want credit for being online for this presentation for the whole night. They need to send an email to the president of the chapter.
Okay.
So I have a record that they were online tonight.
Okay.
And we'll keep a record.
So if you're online, send Jocko an email that you were there and online. He'll send you a record responding to you that you were there, and he'll make sure that you're recorded. Sound good?
Don't wait 6 months.
Yeah, don't wait 6 months or ISC squared is going to really do something awful to you. There you go.
Oh, that's even better.
Thank you for paying attention and not sleeping.
Everyone, please, down each minute. We can go around the room. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Down each minute is an opportunity to talk about anything that you found really interesting since the end of our last session in June. Work you're looking for, work you have available to offer, or anything that you just want to, bring up to the group. So let's start in the way back.
I'm Sonia. I actually work for Staffing North America. We do have a position open for a application developer. So if you've got some skills and are looking for a new opportunity, just see me and I can give you the details.
They're noting that they can't hear us online, so we might want to pass around the mic.
I'm sorry. They're really down.
Who's next? Pass.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Look right that way and smile.
Come out here. All right. My name is James Wells. I graduated from Indiana University with a degree in cybersecurity and computer informatics last year, and in the market for any kind of cybersecurity job I can get my hands on, just get my foot in the door. So if any of you guys want to talk, I have resumes, or just talk about anything security related, I like to do that as well. So thank you.
Quick announcement. So just very quickly, it's not necessarily a guarantee, but in combination with the IAPP, IDEX, Maine Cybersecurity Cluster, and John Baptist High School has applied for a planning grant from NIST to do cybersecurity workforce development northeast of Boston. So if we get the grant is specifically to put the plan together to actually execute a program to create co-ops and internship programs in the future. But if we do get it, we'll be looking for participation from local businesses, basically writing letters of support saying that they would hire a co-op or an intern in cybersecurity.
Cool, very nice. I'm good. Anybody else?
I'm Gary Susi. I'm a manager at Barry Dunn, and we are constantly taking resumes and constantly increasing the amount of work we've been doing. We've hired several people in just the last couple of months, and that's allowed us to kind of increase the amount of work we're going after. We work in the government sector, doing a lot of risk assessments, expanding into penetration testing, vulnerability scanning, looking very hard at the ICS SCADA fields, and just looking wherever security can be applied and how we can assist in improving people's security postures. So if you would like to send me your information, I don't have any business cards on me for some reason. I'm totally out. But you can reach me at gsoucy, that's GSOUCY @berrydunn.com. For anybody who's looking at the screen, that's how it's spelled. So BERRYDUNN.com. Thank you.
I guess I better speak up on behalf of my organization. Sage Data Security is an awesome organization to work with. We were just named one of the best companies to work for in Maine, right? Did I get that right? One of. Okay, sorry. We'll win again. We won last year. We'll win again. We are always looking for talent in the area of professional services, penetration testing, technical skills, log analysis. So yes, anyone with an interest to either break into the field or make a transition from another worthy competitor to us, please, you can get in touch with me and I'll put you in touch with the right people. I don't do any hiring, but you know, I always promote, always promote. Is there anyone else who wants to participate in the Down East Minute? No? All right. So then we're good. Again, thank you very much to Ryan for running the Adobe Connect and for Kaplan for hosting us. You know, we like this place. I would really appreciate some help cleaning up so no one has any complaints about, you know, we left it in a horrible state. If we can get a little bit of help with that, we're good to go, and we'll see you all next month. Thank you.